Emma Collins had perfected the art of being invisible. In Pine Ridge, Colorado, she was just the quiet librarian who'd inherited the old bookstore from a great-aunt nobody remembered meeting. She wore thick-rimmed glasses that made her brown eyes look larger than they were, kept her auburn hair in a simple ponytail, and favored oversized sweaters that hid the lean muscle beneath. At 38, she moved through the small mountain town like a whisper, shelving books with careful precision and serving coffee to locals who thought her biggest excitement was the arrival of new romance novels. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But on that crisp October morning, when the morning mist clung to the Rockies like secrets waiting to be revealed, Emma stood at her bedroom window, holding a cup of black coffee, watching a red truck with out-of-state plates circle the block for the third time. Her fingers, steady as mountain stone, didn't tremble as she set down the mug and moved to the antique dresser that held more than vintage linens. Behind a false panel lay a scope powerful enough to count the stubble on a man's face from 800 yards away. The truck finally parked across from Collins' Books and Coffee, and two men in hiking gear stepped out, their movements too coordinated, their attention too focused on her storefront window. Emma had been waiting 9 years for this moment, had known it would come eventually. In Pine Ridge, strangers stuck out like blood on fresh snow, and these particular strangers carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of men who'd been trained to kill. She finished her coffee in one long swallow, the bitter taste familiar as an old prayer, and headed downstairs to open her shop. Today would be the day Emma Collins, the Harmless bookstore owner, would have to remember how to be someone else entirely. The brass bell above the door of Collins' Books and Coffee chimed its familiar welcome as Emma flipped the sign from closed to open, the sound as comforting and predictable as everything else in her carefully constructed life. Pine Ridge operated on mountain time, which meant things happened when they happened, never rushed, never urgent. The morning regulars would begin trickling in within the hour, starting with old Pete Garrison, who came for his daily crossword puzzle and black coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Emma moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency, starting the commercial coffee machine that had been ancient when she'd inherited it, checking the register count, and arranging the day's special display of local hiking guides near the front window. The bookstore occupied the ground floor of a converted Victorian house, its high ceilings and hardwood floors giving it a warmth that made people want to linger. Comfortable reading chairs were scattered throughout, and the coffee corner had become an unofficial community center where locals gathered to discuss everything from weather patterns to the latest gossip. What the residents of Pine Ridge didn't know was that Emma had chosen this location with the same strategic precision that had once made her the most feared sniper in military special operations. The building sat at the intersection of Pine Ridge's two main streets, offering clear sightlines in 4 directions. The second floor, which she'd converted into a cozy apartment, provided elevated observation points disguised as charming dormer windows. The basement, supposedly used for book storage, housed a climate-controlled shooting range that could accommodate targets up to 200 yards through a tunnel system that emerged in the abandoned mining complex 3 miles outside town. Pete Garrison shuffled through the door at precisely 8:15, his weathered hands already reaching for the crossword puzzle section of the Denver Post. At 74, Pete was a retired forest ranger who knew every trail and cave system within 50 miles of Pine Ridge. He'd been the first person to accept Emma when she'd arrived 9 years ago with a story about inheriting the bookstore from a reclusive great-aunt named Millicent Collins, a woman whose existence Emma had created with the help of forged documents and carefully planted records. "Morning, Emma," Pete called out, settling into his usual chair by the window that faced the mountains. "You see those fellows in the red truck? Been sitting out there since dawn, just watching the street." Emma poured Pete's coffee into his regular mug, the one with a faded picture of a mountain bighorn sheep. Her movements remained steady, but every muscle in her body had shifted into a state of controlled readiness that would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't been trained to recognize the signs. "Probably just tourists checking their GPS," she said, adding exactly 2 sugars to Pete's coffee the way he liked it. "Hunting season brings all kinds of strangers through town." Pete squinted through the window, his old ranger instincts still sharp despite his age. "Could be, but they're not dressed for hunting." More like those federal types who came through a few years back when they were surveying for that new cell tower. He accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. You know how I feel about government people poking around where they don't belong. Emma knew exactly how Pete felt about government interference, which was one of the reasons she'd cultivated his friendship. Pete Garrison was the unofficial eyes and ears of Pine Ridge, a man who noticed when things didn't fit the natural pattern of small-town life. His trust had been essential to establishing her cover, and his protective instincts toward the community had become an early warning system she'd never asked for but had learned to appreciate. The bell chimed again as Sandra Martinez pushed through the door, her 2 young children trailing behind her like enthusiastic puppies. Sandra taught 4th grade at Pine Ridge Elementary and had become Emma's closest friend in town, though friendship was a luxury Emma had never intended to allow herself. Sandra was the kind of woman who brought homemade cookies to new neighbors and organized community fundraisers with the efficiency of a military campaign. She was also one of the few people in Pine Ridge who'd never stopped asking gentle questions about Emma's past. "Emma, you look tired," Sandra observed, corralling her children toward the picture book section. "Late night reading again?" Emma smiled, the expression coming easier after 9 years of practice. "You know me, can't put down a good mystery novel." The lie rolled off her tongue smoothly, though the truth was that Emma rarely slept more than 4 hours at a stretch, a habit ingrained during years of military service when staying alert could mean the difference between completing a mission and coming home in a flag-draped coffin. Sandra's children, 8-year-old Miguel and 6-year-old Sophia, had already discovered the new shipment of children's books Emma had strategically placed at their eye level. Miguel was obsessed with adventure stories about brave knights and hidden treasures, while Sophia preferred books about animals and nature. Emma had learned their preferences through careful observation, the same attention to detail that had once helped her track targets across hostile territory. "Mrs. Collins," Sophia announced, holding up a book about wolves. "Did you know that wolves can hear sounds from 6 miles away?" Emma knelt down to Sophia's level, genuinely charmed by the girl's enthusiasm for learning. "That's incredible, Sophia. What else did you learn about wolves?" As Sophia launched into an excited explanation about pack hunting strategies, Emma found herself thinking about her own pack, the unit she'd served with during 8 years of classified operations in places that didn't appear on any official maps. Master Sergeant Emma Collins had been known as Eagle Eye, a sniper capable of impossible shots under conditions that would have broken lesser soldiers. Her spotter and closest friend had been Tyler Martinez, a young soldier from El Paso whose steady hands and quick calculations had made their partnership legendary within the special operations community. The thought of Tyler brought a familiar tightness to Emma's chest. She'd spent 9 years wondering if he was still alive, still wondering if the mission that had destroyed their unit and forced her into hiding had claimed his life along with so many others. The official story was that Precision Unit had been disbanded due to budget cuts, but Emma knew the truth was far more complicated and dangerous than any government press release would ever admit. The coffee shop portion of her business began filling with the usual morning crowd. Dr. Patricia Wong, Pine Ridge's only physician, came in for her daily herbal tea and medical journal reading. Jim Kowalski, who ran the hardware store, grabbed his regular black coffee and bear claw pastry. Maria Santos, the postal worker, picked up her caramel latte and the latest romance novel Emma had special ordered for her. Each customer received exactly the right greeting, the perfect amount of small talk, and the precise level of attention that reinforced Emma Collins's reputation as a friendly but unremarkable member of the community. But even as she performed the familiar dance of small-town social interaction, Emma's peripheral vision tracked the red truck across the street. The 2 men had switched positions, one now standing near the truck's tailgate with what appeared to be a tablet computer, while the other had moved to a position that offered a clear view of both the bookstore's front entrance and the alley that led to the building's rear exit. Their positioning was textbook surveillance, the kind of setup used when the subjects were considered potentially dangerous and flight risks. Around 10:30, the morning rush slowed to its usual trickle, leaving Emma with just a few customers browsing the book sections and Pete still working on his crossword puzzle. She used the lull to check her security system, a network of hidden cameras and motion sensors that monitored the bookstore, her apartment, and the surrounding streets. The system had cost more than most people in Pine Ridge made in a year, but it was invisible, sophisticated, and absolutely necessary for someone living under an assumed identity. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The cameras showed her what she'd expected to see. The two men from the red truck had been joined by a third person, a woman in professional attire who carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to giving orders. They were clearly planning something, studying the building layout and discussing approach routes with the methodical precision of professionals. Emma's training kicked in automatically, her mind shifting into tactical mode as she assessed threats, escape routes, and defensive positions. The bookstore's layout, which appeared random and cozy to customers, had been carefully designed to provide cover and concealment. The heavy wooden bookcases could stop small arms fire, the reading areas offered multiple exit points, and the coffee counter provided access to both the basement shooting range and the second-floor apartment through concealed passages Emma had installed during her first year in Pine Ridge. But even as she planned for potential confrontation, part of Emma hoped that 9 years of careful anonymity hadn't been compromised. She'd built a life in Pine Ridge, had found something she'd never experienced during her military service: peace. The idea of abandoning everything she'd created, of walking away from the friends who'd become family, filled her with a sadness that surprised her with its intensity. Sandra Martinez appeared at the coffee counter, her children now settled with picture books in the reading corner. "Emma, you're doing that thing again," she said quietly. "What thing?" Emma asked, though she already knew what Sandra meant. "That scanning thing you do when you're worried about something. Your eyes get really focused, like you're looking for threats that the rest of us can't see." Sandra's voice carried the gentle concern of someone who'd learned to read Emma's moods over the years. "Is everything okay?" Emma forced herself to relax, to push down the hypervigilance that had kept her alive through dozens of combat missions but made her stand out in civilian environments. "Sorry, just thinking about inventory management. You know how exciting my life is." Sandra didn't look convinced, but she'd learned over the years that Emma Collins kept her personal concerns private. Instead, she changed the subject to safer ground. "The kids want to know if you're coming to Miguel's soccer game this weekend. He's been practicing that corner kick you taught him." The invitation touched Emma more than she could express. 9 years ago, when she'd first arrived in Pine Ridge, she'd been a ghost, haunted by classified memories and survival instincts that made normal human connection feel impossible. The idea that she'd become important enough in these children's lives to be invited to soccer games represented a healing she'd never expected to experience. "Wouldn't miss it," Emma said, meaning every word even as she wondered if she'd still be in Pine Ridge come the weekend. Around noon, the situation outside escalated. Emma watched through her security system as the woman in professional attire approached the bookstore's front door, while the two men moved to positions that would prevent any attempted escape through the rear exit. The woman's approach was confident but unthreatening, the kind of calculated performance designed to avoid causing panic among civilian bystanders. Emma quickly assessed her options. She could attempt to slip out through the basement tunnel system before the woman entered, but that would mean abandoning her customers and potentially putting innocent people at risk if these were hostile actors. She could maintain her cover and hope that whatever brought these people to Pine Ridge had nothing to do with her past, but the professional nature of their surveillance suggested otherwise. Or she could prepare for confrontation while hoping that 9 years of careful identity construction would hold up under whatever scrutiny was coming. The brass bell chimed as the woman entered Collins Books and Coffee, her appearance immediately drawing attention from the customers scattered throughout the store. She was tall, perhaps 45, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a severe bun and gray eyes that missed nothing. Her clothing was expensive but understated, the kind of professional attire worn by people who wielded authority without needing to advertise it. "Good afternoon," the woman said, approaching the coffee counter with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Agent Diana Foster with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm hoping you might be able to help me with some information about the area." Emma's hands remained steady as she wiped down the counter, but her mind was racing through possibilities and calculations. FBI meant official government interest, which could be either better or worse than the private contractors she'd been expecting. Official agencies operated under rules and oversight, but they also had resources and reach that made them far more dangerous in the long term. "Of course," Emma replied, maintaining the helpful demeanor expected of a small-town business owner. "What can I tell you about Pine Ridge?" Agent Foster glanced around the bookstore, taking in the comfortable atmosphere and the handful of customers who were trying not to obviously eavesdrop on the conversation. Is there somewhere we could speak privately? This concerns a matter of national security. The phrase national security sent a chill through Emma. That had nothing to do with the October mountain air. 9 years ago, she disappeared from a debriefing room in a classified facility after learning that Precision Unit's final mission had been compromised from within, that someone with high-level access had sold out her team for reasons she'd never been allowed to understand. The official story claimed that Eagle Eye, Master Sergeant Emma Collins, had died in a training accident, her body supposedly destroyed beyond recovery. Emma Collins, the bookstore owner, had been born from that fictional death, but if Agent Foster was here, it meant someone had connected the dots between past and present. "I'm afraid I don't know anything about national security matters," Emma said carefully. "I just run a bookstore and serve coffee, but if you'd like to ask your questions here, I'm happy to help however I can." Agent Foster's smile became more genuine, as if Emma's response had confirmed something she'd been testing for. "Actually, Miss Collins, I think you know more about national security than you're admitting, especially when it comes to matters involving Precision Unit and a certain Master Sergeant who was supposedly killed in a training accident 9 years ago." The words hit Emma like a sniper's bullet to the chest, precise and devastating. Around the bookstore, the casual atmosphere evaporated as customers sensed the sudden tension. Pete Garrison looked up from his crossword puzzle, his old ranger instincts recognizing the shift from normal to dangerous. Sandra Martinez instinctively moved closer to her children, while Dr. Wong quietly began packing up her medical journals. Emma met Agent Foster's gaze directly, her mind calculating distances, cover positions, and the time it would take to reach any of several weapons hidden throughout the bookstore. But she also thought about the innocent people around her, about Pete and Sandra and the children who'd become part of her life in ways she'd never intended. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Emma said quietly. "My name is Emma Collins. I inherited this bookstore from my great-aunt Millicent 9 years ago. I've lived in Pine Ridge ever since, and I can provide references from dozens of community members who'll vouch for my character." Agent Foster reached into her jacket, moving slowly to avoid triggering a defensive response, and pulled out a tablet computer. She swiped to a photograph that made Emma's breath catch in her throat. A military portrait showing Master Sergeant Emma Collins in dress uniform, her hair regulation short, her eyes holding the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much combat. "Eagle Eye," Agent Foster said quietly. "One of the most decorated snipers in military history. Confirmed kills at distances that broke every existing record. And officially dead for 9 years." She paused, studying Emma's carefully controlled expression. "But we both know that Eagle Eye isn't dead, don't we, Emma? We know she's been living quietly in a small Colorado town, running a bookstore and serving coffee, thinking she could hide from her past forever." The silence that followed stretched like a wire under tension. Emma could feel the weight of 9 years of careful construction hanging in the balance, could sense the life she'd built, preparing to crumble around her. But she could also feel something else stirring, something she'd buried so deep that she'd almost forgotten it existed. The part of her that had once been Eagle Eye, the soldier who'd never failed a mission or abandoned a teammate. "Agent Foster," Emma said, her voice carrying a new undertone that made several customers unconsciously step back. "I think we need to talk." Agent Foster followed Emma through the bookstore to a small office tucked behind the fiction section, her movements careful and deliberate. Emma gestured to a chair across from her desk while maintaining the composed demeanor that had served her well during 9 years of civilian life, but internally every combat instinct was screaming warnings. The office was deliberately cramped, forcing any visitor to sit with their back to the door, while Emma positioned herself with clear sightlines and multiple exit routes. "Coffee," Emma offered, though her hand rested casually near a desk drawer that contained more than office supplies. "Thank you, no." Agent Foster settled into the chair, her gray eyes cataloging every detail of the office with professional efficiency. "I'm here because we need your help, Emma. Or should I say Eagle Eye?" Emma remained silent, neither confirming nor denying the accusation. 9 years of maintaining her cover had taught her that silence was often more powerful than denial, and that people revealed more when they felt compelled to fill conversational gaps. Agent Foster opened her tablet again, swiping through what appeared to be classified military files. Precision Unit was officially disbanded in October 2014, following what Pentagon records describe as, quote, budgetary reallocations and strategic restructuring. But we both know that's bureaucratic fiction, don't we? The unit was eliminated because someone discovered that classified operational intelligence was being sold to foreign buyers. The words struck Emma like physical blows, each revelation confirming fears she'd carried for nearly a decade. Precision Unit had been her life, her family, her purpose. The 8-person team had operated in the shadows of official military structure, handling assignments too sensitive for regular special forces and too dangerous for conventional intelligence agencies. They'd been ghosts within the machine, invisible soldiers fighting wars that couldn't be acknowledged. Precision Unit's final mission was supposed to be routine surveillance, Agent Foster continued. Monitor a suspected arms dealer in the mountains of Afghanistan, document his connections, and report back for official action through proper channels. Instead, the mission became a massacre. 7 members of your unit were killed in what appeared to be a perfectly coordinated ambush. Emma's hands clenched involuntarily, muscle memory triggering the phantom sensation of her rifle's weight, the familiar comfort of its balance against her shoulder. She'd carried the guilt of that night for 9 years. The knowledge that she'd been the only survivor of an operation that had gone catastrophically wrong. In her nightmares, she still heard Tyler Martinez's voice calling for extraction, still felt the helplessness of being too far away to provide covering fire when her teammates needed her most. The official report blamed intelligence failures and tactical miscommunication, Agent Foster said. But classified internal investigations revealed evidence of deliberate betrayal. Someone with access to Precision Unit's operational planning had provided detailed mission parameters to hostile forces. The ambush wasn't random bad luck, Emma. It was murder. Why are you telling me this? Emma asked quietly, her voice steady despite the emotional earthquake happening beneath the surface. Agent Foster leaned forward, her expression shifting from professional detachment to something approaching urgency. Because Tyler Martinez is still alive. The words hit Emma like a sniper's bullet to the chest, precise and devastating. For 9 years, she'd assumed that Tyler had died with the rest of Precision Unit, that her decision to disappear rather than attend his funeral had been cowardice rather than survival instinct. The guilt had eaten at her like acid, the knowledge that she'd abandoned her spotter and closest friend when he'd needed her most. That's impossible, Emma whispered. I saw the casualty reports. Tyler Martinez was listed as killed in action, body recovered, and returned to family for burial. The body returned to his family belonged to another soldier, misidentified in the chaos of multiple casualties. Agent Foster swiped to a new file on her tablet, showing recent surveillance photographs of a man Emma recognized despite 9 years of aging and hardship. Tyler's been living under an assumed identity, just like you. But unlike you, he never stopped investigating what happened to Precision Unit. Emma stared at the photographs, her trained eye noting the way Tyler carried himself differently now. Shoulders set against invisible weight, eyes that scanned for threats with the hypervigilance of someone who'd learned that safety was always temporary. He looked older than his 41 years, weathered by experiences that had left visible scars on his face and invisible damage that showed in his posture. For 9 years, Tyler's been gathering evidence about the conspiracy that destroyed your unit, Agent Foster continued. He's identified the people responsible, documented the financial transactions that paid for your teammates' deaths, and compiled enough proof to bring down a network that extends far beyond one arms dealer in Afghanistan. What kind of network? Emma asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. Agent Foster's expression hardened. A consortium of defense contractors, intelligence officials, and foreign buyers who've been manipulating military operations for profit. They arrange conflicts, sell weapons to all sides, and eliminate anyone who discovers their involvement. Precision Unit stumbled onto their operations accidentally, and they couldn't allow that intelligence to reach official channels. Emma processed this information with the analytical precision that had made her such an effective sniper. The scope of the conspiracy explained why her unit's destruction had been so thorough, why the official investigation had been buried under classification levels that made meaningful oversight impossible, and why her own survival had required complete disappearance from any system that might track her location. Tyler discovered that the conspiracy is still active, Agent Foster said. They're currently planning an operation that will destabilize 3 separate regions while generating billions in weapons sales and reconstruction contracts. But Tyler's investigation has been compromised, and now he's being hunted by the same people who killed your teammates. Where is he? Emma asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Missing for 72 hours. His last communication came from a location in northern New Mexico, near the Colorado border. He was investigating a facility that appears to be a training center for mercenaries working for the conspiracy. Intelligence suggests he was captured during reconnaissance and is being held for interrogation. Emma stood and moved to the office window, looking out at the peaceful streets of Pine Ridge, where people lived normal lives unburdened by knowledge of shadow wars and corporate conspiracies. For 9 years, she'd been one of those people, finding peace in the simple rhythm of small-town life. But Tyler Martinez had been her spotter, her partner, her friend. In the brutal mathematics of military service, he'd saved her life more times than she could count, and she'd done the same for him. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Emma said without turning around. "We need you to help us extract Tyler before his captors force him to reveal everything he knows about the conspiracy. Once they have his intelligence, they'll eliminate him and disappear the evidence. This is our only chance to stop them and bring justice for Precision Unit." Emma turned back to face Agent Foster, her expression carefully neutral. "I'm a bookstore owner, Agent Foster. I serve coffee and recommend novels to tourists. I think you're confusing me with someone else." Agent Foster smiled, but there was no humor in it. Yesterday morning, a coyote wandered into Pine Ridge's main street, probably confused by the early snow. Sheriff Bradley called you because several children were nearby, and the animal appeared aggressive. You borrowed his service weapon and put the coyote down with a single shot at 40 yards, striking precisely behind the left ear for an instant. Humane kill. Emma remembered the incident but had hoped it had gone unnoticed by anyone with the training to understand its significance. Most people would see only a concerned citizen helping with a dangerous animal, but someone with military experience would recognize the shot placement as expert marksmanship, the kind of precision that didn't come from casual weekend shooting. Sheriff Bradley mentioned that you'd never handled his weapon before, yet you showed no hesitation with the safety mechanism, grip, or sight alignment. He also noted that you fired without using the weapon's sights, relying instead on what you called instinctive shooting. That's a technique taught only to military snipers and specialized law enforcement units. Agent Foster opened another file on her tablet, showing what appeared to be a detailed analysis of the coyote incident. Ballistics examination of the shot showed entry and exit wounds, consistent with someone who understands exactly how bullet trajectory and kinetic energy work at distance. The angle of impact suggests the shooter compensated for crosswind that weather data confirms was present but invisible to untrained observers. Emma realized that her carefully maintained cover had been unraveling for longer than she'd suspected, that small actions performed without thinking had left a trail of evidence pointing back to her military training. 9 years of paranoid security had been undone by a moment of instinctive competence, the muscle memory of skills that could never be completely suppressed. Tyler specifically requested that we recruit you if something happened to him, Agent Foster said. He said Eagle Eye was the only operator skilled enough to infiltrate a hostile facility and extract personnel under combat conditions. He also said you were the only person he trusted to complete his mission if he couldn't. The weight of old loyalty pressed down on Emma like mountain stone. Tyler Martinez had been more than her spotter. He'd been the younger brother she'd never had, a kid from El Paso whose steady hands and quick calculations had made impossible shots routine. During their years together in Precision Unit, they'd developed an almost telepathic connection, able to communicate complex tactical information with subtle gestures and shared glances. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Emma asked. "How do I know this isn't some elaborate setup to flush me out of hiding?" Agent Foster reached into her jacket again, this time producing a small digital recorder. "Tyler anticipated you might need convincing. He recorded this message 6 months ago, when he first discovered evidence that the conspiracy was still active." She pressed play, and Tyler's voice filled the small office, older and rougher than Emma remembered, but unmistakably him. "Emma, if you're hearing this, it means something's gone wrong and Diana Foster has found you. I know you're probably angry that I kept investigating instead of disappearing like you did, but I couldn't let it go. The people who killed our teammates are still out there, still profiting from other people's blood. Emma closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the familiar sound of Tyler's voice and the flood of memories it triggered. Shared missions, shared dangers, shared trust that had kept them alive through situations that should have killed them both. I found them, Emma. All of them. The names, the bank accounts, the operational plans. Everything we need to prove what really happened to Precision Unit and prevent it from happening to other soldiers. But if you're hearing this recording, it means they found me first. Tyler's voice carried the weight of 9 years spent pursuing justice while living in the shadows. I need you to finish what I started. Not for revenge, though God knows they deserve it, but because there are other units out there, other soldiers who don't know they're being set up for elimination. You're the only person with the skills to infiltrate their facility and retrieve the evidence I've gathered. The recording continued with specific details about Tyler's investigation, coordinates for the facility where he was likely being held, and tactical intelligence about the security measures he'd observed during his reconnaissance. Emma listened with the focused attention of someone whose life had once depended on processing complex information quickly and accurately. I know what I'm asking, Emma. I know you found peace in Pine Ridge, found a life that doesn't involve killing people for reasons we weren't allowed to understand. But Tyler Martinez, your spotter, your friend, is asking Eagle Eye for one last mission. Help me finish this, and then we can both disappear for good. The recording ended with coordinates and access codes that would allow Emma to retrieve additional intelligence from hidden caches Tyler had established. Agent Foster turned off the device and waited, understanding that the decision Emma made in the next few minutes would determine whether Tyler Martinez lived or died. Emma moved to her desk and opened the drawer that contained more than office supplies. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a photograph she hadn't looked at in years. Precision Unit's final team portrait, taken just weeks before their last mission. 8 faces smiled back at her, young soldiers who'd believed they were serving something greater than themselves. The facility where Tyler's being held, Emma said quietly. How heavily defended? Agent Foster consulted her tablet. External security includes electronic surveillance, roving patrols, and what appears to be a centralized command center. Internal layout is unknown, but thermal imaging suggests approximately 30 personnel on site at any given time. The compound is isolated. No civilian population within 10 miles. Emma studied the tactical information with professional interest, her mind automatically calculating approach routes, defensive positions, and extraction possibilities. The facility was designed to keep people in rather than keep attackers out, which suggested different vulnerabilities than a traditional military installation. What resources would be available for support? She asked. Officially, none. This is a deniable operation, no government fingerprints or official backing. Unofficially, Diana Foster has access to equipment and intelligence through channels that don't appear in any budget reports. Agent Foster's smile was sharp as winter wind. Let's just say that certain people in Washington have their own reasons for wanting this conspiracy exposed. Emma walked to the office's small safe, hidden behind a collection of first-edition mysteries. Inside were documents establishing Emma Collins's identity, financial records for the bookstore, and a key to a storage unit in Denver that contained items from her previous life. She'd hoped never to open that storage unit again, but Tyler Martinez had been her spotter, her partner, her friend. If I agree to help, Emma said, I have conditions. Name them. First, this is a rescue mission, not an assassination operation. We extract Tyler and any intelligence he's gathered, but we don't turn this into a massacre. Emma's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to setting operational parameters. Second, when this is over, Emma Collins returns to Pine Ridge and continues running her bookstore. No follow-up missions, no further involvement in whatever war you people are fighting. Agent Foster nodded. Agreed. What else? Third, Tyler gets the same deal. When this is over, he disappears completely, with enough resources to build a new life somewhere safe. No more investigating, no more pursuing conspiracies that want him dead. Done. Anything else? Emma looked out the window at Pine Ridge's peaceful streets, where Sandra Martinez was walking her children home from school and Pete Garrison was heading to the hardware store for his afternoon coffee. In a few hours, she'd been planning to close the bookstore and spend the evening reading in her apartment, living the quiet life she'd built from the ashes of her military career. "Yes," she said finally, "I need 12 hours to make arrangements for the bookstore and say goodbye to some people without explaining why." Tyler held out for 72 hours against professional interrogators. "He can hold out for 12 more." Agent Foster stood, understanding that the negotiation was over and that Eagle Eye had agreed to one final mission. "We'll be ready when you are, but Emma, you should know that once we move on this, there's no going back. The people who killed your teammates won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens their operation." Emma walked Agent Foster to the office door, past bookcases filled with stories of ordinary people who'd found the courage to do extraordinary things when circumstances demanded it. "Agent Foster," she said quietly, "these people made one critical mistake 9 years ago." "What's that?" Emma's smile was cold as high-altitude wind. "They left Eagle Eye alive." After Agent Foster departed, Emma locked the bookstore's front door and flipped the sign to closed, ignoring the disappointed expressions of several customers who'd hoped to browse the evening selection. She moved through the familiar space with new awareness, seeing it now as the sanctuary it had been, but understanding that sanctuary was about to end. In the basement shooting range she'd built beneath the bookstore's foundation, Emma opened a sealed cabinet that contained items she'd hoped never to need again. Inside was a custom rifle that had been built to her exact specifications, a weapon capable of precision shots at distances that most snipers considered impossible. The rifle had no serial number, no manufacturer's markings, and no official existence in any database. She field-stripped the weapon, with movements burned into muscle memory, checking each component with the methodical care that had kept her alive through dozens of combat missions. The rifle was perfectly maintained despite 9 years of storage, its action smooth as silk and its scope calibrated to mathematical precision. Emma assembled the weapon and loaded a single round, then moved to the shooting range's far end, where a target waited at the maximum distance the basement could accommodate. She settled into a prone firing position, feeling her body remember the proper alignment, the breathing pattern, the mental focus that transformed thought into reality through applied ballistics. The shot was perfect, striking the target's center with precision that would have impressed her old instructors. But more importantly, the familiar weight of the rifle felt right in her hands, like greeting an old friend who'd been waiting patiently for her return. Emma Collins, the bookstore owner who served coffee and recommended novels, was about to remember how to be Eagle Eye again. And somewhere in a facility in northern New Mexico, Tyler Martinez was counting on her to remember everything she'd once been capable of accomplishing. The hunt was about to begin. The Denver storage unit sat in an industrial complex 40 miles from Pine Ridge, surrounded by the kind of anonymous concrete buildings that asked no questions and remembered no faces. Emma arrived at dawn, driving a rental car she'd paid for with cash and wearing clothes that could blend into any crowd. The unit itself was small, climate-controlled, and had been paid for 9 years in advance through a series of automated transfers that couldn't be traced back to Emma Collins or anyone else. Inside the unit waited the accumulated tools of her former life. Military-grade communications equipment that could tap into satellite networks and encrypted channels. Body armor designed to stop rifle rounds while maintaining mobility. Night vision systems that turned darkness into tactical advantage. And weapons, carefully maintained and precisely calibrated, each one chosen for specific mission parameters she'd hoped never to encounter again. Emma worked methodically, selecting equipment based on Agent Foster's intelligence about the facility where Tyler was being held. The compound was isolated, but not heavily fortified, designed more for containment than defense against external assault. That suggested the conspiracy valued secrecy over security, which created opportunities for someone with the right training and equipment. Her communications gear included a headset system that would allow real-time coordination with Agent Foster's support team while maintaining operational independence. Emma had insisted on command authority for the actual rescue operation, understanding that successful extraction required split-second decisions that couldn't wait for approval from distant handlers. The weapon selection required more careful consideration. Emma's custom rifle was perfect for long-range precision work, but the compound's layout might require close-quarters combat that demanded different tools. She selected a compact assault rifle that sacrificed some accuracy for maneuverability, along with a sidearm that had proven reliable during her military service. But it was the ammunition selection that revealed the true nature of what Emma was preparing for. Standard military rounds for suppressing resistance and creating tactical advantages, but also specialized rounds designed for specific targets. Armor-piercing for hardened positions, fragmenting rounds for area denial, and precision rounds that could disable electronic equipment without creating casualties. Emma packed everything into a gear bag that looked like expensive hiking equipment, the kind of high-end outdoor gear that wouldn't attract attention in Colorado's recreational wilderness areas. The deception was deliberate. Anyone observing her would see an affluent tourist preparing for a challenging backcountry adventure, not a former military sniper loading for combat operations. The drive to the rendezvous point took 3 hours through mountain roads that climbed steadily toward the Continental Divide. Agent Foster had chosen a location that offered multiple approach routes and escape options while remaining isolated from civilian observation. Emma used the drive time to review everything she knew about Tyler's situation, analyzing the tactical challenges and developing contingency plans for various scenarios. Tyler Martinez had always been methodical in his approach to dangerous situations, a trait that had made him an exceptional spotter and intelligence gatherer. If he'd been captured during reconnaissance, it meant the facility's security was more sophisticated than initial assessments had suggested. That implied either inside information about Tyler's investigation or surveillance capabilities that had detected his presence despite military-grade stealth training. The rendezvous point was an abandoned fire lookout station perched on a ridge that commanded views of 3 separate valleys. Agent Foster was already there when Emma arrived, along with 2 other people she introduced as technical specialists. The team was small, professional, and equipped with satellite communications gear that could coordinate support from resources Emma wasn't supposed to know existed. Tyler's situation has deteriorated, Agent Foster reported without preamble. Signals intelligence suggests they've moved him to a more secure location within the compound, possibly because they've broken some of his initial resistance to interrogation. Emma studied the updated intelligence on Foster's tablet, noting changes in the facility's thermal signature that suggested increased activity and heightened security measures. How long before they extract everything he knows? Professional interrogators using pharmaceutical assistance can break most resistance within 48 hours, one of Foster's specialists replied. Tyler's been missing for 78 hours, which means we're operating on borrowed time. Emma nodded, understanding the implications. Tyler's intelligence about the conspiracy was comprehensive enough to expose operations spanning multiple countries and involving billions of dollars in illegal arms sales. Once his captors accessed that information, they'd have everything needed to eliminate witnesses, destroy evidence, and disappear their network beyond any hope of prosecution. "What's the extraction plan?" Emma asked. Agent Foster opened a tactical map showing the compound's location in relation to natural terrain features and transportation routes. The facility sits in a valley with limited access roads but multiple escape routes through mountain wilderness. Primary approach is from the north, where forest cover extends to within 800 yards of the perimeter fence. Emma studied the map with professional interest, her mind automatically calculating sight lines, approach routes, and defensive positions. The compound's isolation was both an advantage and a disadvantage. While it limited the number of potential defenders, it also meant that any alarm would trap attackers in an area with limited escape options. "Electronic surveillance?" she asked. "Standard commercial security system with some military upgrades," the technical specialist replied. "Motion sensors, thermal imaging, and automated alert systems. Nothing that can't be defeated with proper equipment and timing." Emma examined photographs of the compound taken from various angles, noting the placement of buildings, defensive positions, and what appeared to be vehicle maintenance areas. The layout suggested a facility designed for training rather than detention, which meant Tyler was likely being held in a building not originally intended for prisoner containment. Guard rotation patterns? 6-hour shifts with overlapping coverage during personnel changes. Approximately 8 guards on duty at any time, with additional support staff who might be armed but aren't trained for combat operations. Agent Foster highlighted patrol routes on the satellite imagery. Guards are equipped with standard small arms and communication gear, but they're not military personnel. More like corporate security with some tactical training. Emma processed this information with the analytical precision that had made her such an effective sniper. Corporate security meant predictable procedures and limited improvisation under pressure. Military personnel would adapt quickly to unexpected threats, but corporate guards would likely follow established protocols, even when those protocols became liability rather than advantage. "What kind of support can you provide during the operation?" Emma asked. "Communications monitoring and coordination, but no direct intervention," Foster replied. "This has to appear to be a private rescue operation with no government involvement." If it goes wrong, Emma Collins acted alone based on personal loyalty to a former teammate. Emma understood the political necessities that required deniability, but she also understood that solo operations carried risks that could be mitigated with proper support. "I'll need real-time intelligence about guard positions and facility status during the approach and extraction phases. We can provide that through secure communications, but response time will be limited by our need to maintain distance from the operational area." Foster's expression conveyed both apology and determination. "Emma, if this goes wrong, we can't rescue you. Once you're inside that compound, you're on your own until you reach the extraction point." Emma had operated under similar constraints during her military service, understanding that deniable operations required accepting risks that conventional missions would never tolerate. The difference was that military operations served strategic objectives that justified individual sacrifice, while this mission served personal loyalty and the pursuit of justice for murdered teammates. "When do we move?" Emma asked. "Tonight. Weather forecast shows cloud cover that will limit visibility for overhead surveillance, and intelligence suggests minimal staffing during late-night shifts." Foster consulted her tactical chronometer. "Insertion at 2300 hours, with extraction window beginning at 0300. Emma calculated the operational timeline, understanding that 4 hours would be adequate for infiltration, location of Tyler, and extraction if everything proceeded according to plan, but she also understood that complex operations rarely proceeded according to plan, and that unexpected complications could stretch the timeline beyond the available window of opportunity. "I'll need detailed floor plans for the buildings where Tyler might be held," Emma said. Foster's technical specialist produced architectural drawings that appeared to have been obtained through channels that didn't officially exist. The compound was originally a corporate retreat center, converted for its current purpose approximately 3 years ago. Most buildings retain their original layout, but this structure has been modified with enhanced security features. Emma studied the drawings, noting that the modified building included what appeared to be detention cells, interrogation rooms, and enhanced electronic security systems. The layout suggested that Tyler was likely being held in one of 3 possible locations, each requiring different tactical approaches for successful extraction. "Communication protocols. Encrypted burst transmissions on a frequency that won't appear on standard monitoring equipment," Foster replied, handing Emma an earpiece that looked like expensive consumer electronics. "Check in every 30 minutes during approach phase. Continuous monitoring during facility penetration." Emma tested the communication gear, satisfied with its clarity and security features. Military-grade encryption would prevent interception by the facility's security systems, while the burst transmission protocol would minimize the risk of direction finding by hostile forces. As evening approached, Emma completed her final preparations with the methodical care that had kept her alive through dozens of combat missions. Each piece of equipment was checked and double-checked, every contingency plan reviewed and refined. The ritual of preparation served both practical and psychological purposes, building confidence while identifying potential problems before they became critical failures. Agent Foster approached as Emma conducted her final equipment inspection. "There's something else you should know about Tyler's situation," she said quietly. "Intelligence suggests he's not the only prisoner in that facility. We've identified at least 2 other people being held there, possibly additional members of Precision Unit, who were thought to have died in the original ambush." The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. The official casualty reports had listed 7 members of Precision Unit as killed in action, their bodies recovered and returned to families for burial. If Tyler was alive, and if other team members had also survived the ambush only to be captured and imprisoned for 9 years, then the scope of the conspiracy was even more horrific than she'd imagined. "Who?" Emma asked, though she dreaded the answer. Foster consulted her intelligence files. "Thermal imaging shows 3 distinct heat signatures in the detention area, but we can't confirm identities without closer reconnaissance." What we know is that the facility has been holding long-term prisoners for several years, people who've been kept alive for interrogation purposes. Emma closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the possibility that teammates she'd mourned for 9 years might still be alive, might have spent nearly a decade in captivity, while she'd built a peaceful life in Pine Ridge. The guilt was crushing. The knowledge that her decision to disappear rather than investigate might have condemned her friends to years of imprisonment and torture. "Emma," Foster said gently, "whatever you're thinking, remember that you couldn't have known. The intelligence that led us to this facility only became available through Tyler's investigation. Without his work, we'd never have discovered that anyone survived the original ambush." But Emma's mind was already shifting into tactical mode, calculating the complications that additional prisoners would create for the extraction operation. Multiple captives meant longer exposure time within the facility, increased likelihood of detection, and greater complexity in managing an escape route that could accommodate injured or weakened personnel. "This changes the operational parameters," Emma said. "Extracting 3 people instead of 1 requires different equipment, different timing, and different contingency planning." "We understand if you want to reconsider," Foster replied. "This is significantly more dangerous than we originally discussed." Emma looked toward the valley where the compound waited in gathering darkness, where Tyler Martinez and possibly other members of Precision Unit were counting on rescue from an enemy that had already proven willing to murder American soldiers for profit. The mission had become more complex, more dangerous, and more critical than anyone had anticipated. "No," Emma said finally, "we're not leaving anyone behind. Not this time." As full darkness settled over the mountains, Emma began her final approach to the compound. She moved through the forest with the silent precision of someone who'd spent years learning to be invisible, using natural cover and terrain features to mask her advance. The night vision equipment transformed the darkness into green-tinted clarity, revealing patrol routes and security measures that would have been invisible to unequipped observers. The compound's perimeter fence was exactly where intelligence had indicated, a 12-foot barrier topped with razor wire but lacking the electronic sensors that would have made penetration significantly more difficult. Emma bypassed the fence entirely, using a drainage culvert that passed beneath the barrier, and emerged within the compound's interior. Inside the perimeter, Emma paused to observe the facility's security measures and patrol patterns. The guards moved with the casual confidence of people who'd never encountered serious threats, following predictable routes that created gaps in coverage large enough for a trained infiltrator to exploit. The building housing the detention area was separated from the main complex by approximately 200 yards of open ground, broken by scattered vehicles and maintenance equipment. Emma identified 3 possible approach routes, each offering different advantages and risks. She selected the path that provided maximum cover while maintaining tactical flexibility for rapid withdrawal if the operation was compromised. Moving across the open ground required patience and precise timing, waiting for guards to complete their patrol circuits before advancing to the next position. Emma's progress was measured in yards rather than miles, each movement calculated to avoid detection while maintaining forward momentum toward her objective. The detention building's external security was more sophisticated than the perimeter defenses, featuring motion sensors and thermal imaging systems that would detect conventional infiltration attempts. But Emma's equipment included countermeasures designed specifically for defeating such systems, electronic warfare tools that could create blind spots in surveillance coverage. As she prepared to penetrate the building itself, Emma's communication gear crackled with an urgent message from Agent Foster. "Eagle Eye, be advised we're detecting increased vehicle traffic approaching the compound. Possible reinforcement convoy. Estimated arrival in 30 minutes." The timeline had just compressed dramatically. What had been a carefully planned operation, with adequate time for methodical execution, was now a race against approaching forces that could trap Emma inside a hostile facility with no hope of extraction. She had 30 minutes to locate Tyler and any other prisoners, navigate whatever security measures protected the detention area, and extract multiple people who might be injured or weakened by years of captivity. Emma checked her equipment one final time, understanding that the next 30 minutes would determine whether Tyler Martinez and possibly other members of Precision Unit would finally come home, or whether they would disappear forever into the shadow world of corporate conspiracy and government deniability. The hunt was about to become a rescue mission under combat conditions, and Eagle Eye was ready to prove that some skills never fade, no matter how long they remain dormant. Emma disabled the detention building's motion sensors with surgical precision, using electronic countermeasures that created a 15-minute window of invisible movement through the facility's corridors. The building's interior was sterile and functional, designed for containment rather than comfort, with reinforced walls that would muffle any sounds of resistance or rescue attempts. The hallway stretched ahead of her like a tunnel into hell, lined with doors that could hide either empty rooms or imprisoned teammates she'd believed dead for 9 years. Emma moved with the fluid silence of someone who'd spent years learning to be a ghost, checking each room systematically while monitoring her tactical chronometer and the approaching deadline imposed by incoming reinforcements. The first 3 rooms were empty, their sparse furnishings suggesting they'd once held prisoners who were no longer present. Emma felt a chill of dread at the implications, understanding that empty cells might mean successful escapes or eliminated witnesses, with no way to determine which possibility applied without finding the current occupants. The 4th room contained what appeared to be an interrogation setup, complete with recording equipment and medical supplies that suggested pharmaceutical-assisted questioning. Fresh bloodstains on the chair restraints indicated recent use, and Emma's heart clenched with the knowledge that Tyler or other teammates might have been tortured in this sterile chamber while she'd been serving coffee and recommending novels in Pine Ridge. Her communication gear whispered with updates from Agent Foster's monitoring position. Eagle Eye, reinforcement convoy is 22 minutes out. We're also detecting increased radio chatter from inside the compound, suggesting they may be aware of your presence. Emma acknowledged the transmission with a single click, understanding that verbal communication might compromise her position if hostile forces were conducting electronic surveillance. 22 minutes was adequate time for extraction if she could locate the prisoners quickly, but any delays or complications would trap all of them inside a facility about to be flooded with additional security personnel. The 5th room's door was different from the others, reinforced with additional locking mechanisms and what appeared to be soundproofing materials. Emma's lockpicking tools made quick work of the mechanical security, but the electronic locks required more sophisticated countermeasures that consumed precious minutes from her shrinking operational window. Inside, she found Tyler Martinez chained to a metal chair, his face bearing the evidence of systematic beatings, and his clothing torn from what appeared to be prolonged interrogation sessions. But his eyes were alert and focused, tracking her movement with the awareness of someone who'd maintained mental resistance despite physical torture. "Jesus Christ, Emma," Tyler whispered, his voice hoarse from dehydration and abuse. "I knew you'd come. I told them Eagle Eye doesn't abandon her spotter." Emma moved quickly to Tyler's restraints, using specialized tools to defeat the chains and security devices that had kept him immobilized. "How many others?" she asked quietly, checking Tyler's physical condition while monitoring the hallway for approaching threats. "2 more," Tyler replied, flexing his hands as circulation returned to his arms. "Sarah Chen and Marcus Webb from our original unit. They've been here for years, Emma. Years of interrogation and torture while the rest of the world thought they were dead." The names hit Emma like physical blows. Sarah Chen had been Precision Unit's intelligence specialist, a brilliant analyst who could decode enemy communications and predict tactical movements with uncanny accuracy. Marcus Webb had been their demolitions expert, capable of creating precisely controlled explosions that could eliminate targets without harming nearby civilians. Both had been listed as killed in action during the ambush that destroyed their unit. "Where are they being held?" Emma asked, helping Tyler to his feet and noting that he could move despite obvious injuries. "2 doors down on the left, and the room at the end of the hallway," Tyler replied. "But Emma, there's something else you need to know. The person running this operation, the one behind the conspiracy that killed our teammates, he's here tonight." Captain Robert Hayes arrived this afternoon for a personal interrogation session. Robert Hayes had been Precision Unit's commanding officer, a career soldier who'd earned their trust and loyalty through shared dangers and professional competence. Emma had never suspected that Hayes might be involved in the conspiracy that destroyed their unit, had never imagined that their own commander might have orchestrated the ambush that killed their teammates. "Hayes sold us out?" Emma asked, though Tyler's expression had already confirmed her worst fears. "For $20 million and a guaranteed position with the defense contractors after his military retirement," Tyler said. "I've got proof, financial records and communications that show how the whole thing was planned." Hayes provided our mission parameters to hostile forces, then collected payment for eliminating witnesses to arms deals and smuggling operations. Emma's mind reeled with the implications. Captain Hayes had been more than their commanding officer. He'd been a mentor and father figure to young soldiers who'd trusted him with their lives. The betrayal was so complete and devastating that it redefined everything Emma thought she understood about loyalty, duty, and the military code that had once given her life meaning. "We'll deal with Hayes after we extract Sarah and Marcus," Emma said, though part of her wanted to hunt down their former commander immediately and settle accounts with extreme prejudice. They moved down the hallway together, Tyler's familiarity with the building's layout compensating for his physical weakness from prolonged captivity. Emma covered their advance while Tyler handled the door locks, their old partnership resuming automatically despite 9 years of separation and drastically different circumstances. Sarah Chen was in worse condition than Tyler, showing signs of malnutrition and what appeared to be untreated injuries from interrogation sessions. But her mind was sharp and focused, recognizing Emma immediately despite her civilian appearance and obvious surprise at seeing her supposedly dead teammate. "Eagle Eye," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her bruised face. "Tyler said you'd survived, but I never believed it until now." Emma helped Sarah to her feet, noting that the intelligence specialist could walk but would need assistance during any rapid movement. "How much can you move under your own power?" "Enough," Sarah replied with determination that reminded Emma why Sarah Chen had been such an effective member of their unit. "Get me out of here, and I'll run a marathon if necessary." Marcus Webb was in the worst condition of the three, bearing signs of prolonged torture and what appeared to be deliberately inflicted injuries designed to cause maximum pain without permanent incapacitation. He was barely conscious when Emma and Tyler reached his cell, his breathing shallow and his pulse weak enough to suggest serious internal injuries. "Marcus," Emma said quietly, checking his vital signs while Tyler examined the extent of his injuries. "Can you hear me?" "It's Emma, we're getting you out of here." Marcus's eyes opened slowly, struggling to focus on Emma's face before recognition dawned. "Emma Collins," he whispered. "The woman who disappeared. I always wondered if you were smart enough to run or dead enough to stay quiet." "Neither," Emma replied, lifting Marcus carefully and noting that he could support some of his own weight despite obvious pain. "Just patient enough to wait for the right moment to come back." Tyler grabbed Marcus's other arm, and together they began moving toward the building's exit while Emma monitored their communication gear for updates from Agent Foster's surveillance position. The timeline was becoming critical, with reinforcements now less than 15 minutes from arrival, and the compound's internal security becoming increasingly aware that something was wrong. "Eagle Eye, we're detecting significant radioactivity from inside the compound," Agent Foster's voice crackled through Emma's earpiece. "Multiple units are being recalled from patrol routes, suggesting they're consolidating for a facility-wide search." Emma acknowledged the transmission while calculating their remaining options for extraction. The original plan had assumed a single prisoner and a 30-minute operational window, but current circumstances required moving 3 weakened people through hostile territory with less than 15 minutes before overwhelming force arrived to prevent their escape. They reached the building's exit, just as Emma's motion sensor detectors indicated approaching personnel from multiple directions. The compound's security forces were converging on the detention building, either responding to triggered alarms or following standard procedures for facility lockdown. Either way, Emma and her rescued teammates were about to face armed opposition with limited time and resources for sustained combat. "Tyler, can you handle a weapon?" Emma asked, offering him one of her backup sidearms. "Like riding a bicycle," Tyler replied, checking the weapon's action with movements that proved muscle memory remained intact despite years of captivity. Emma positioned herself at the building's main exit, using her night vision equipment to identify approaching threats and calculate optimal firing positions. 6 guards were advancing on the building from different directions, moving with the careful coordination of trained professionals who understood they were dealing with dangerous opposition. The first guard rounded the building's corner at precisely the wrong moment, walking directly into Emma's field of fire. Her suppressed rifle eliminated him with surgical precision, the subsonic round dropping him silently before he could alert his teammates to the rescue operation in progress. But eliminating threats also started a tactical clock that would bring additional opposition once the guards failed to report their positions. Emma had perhaps 5 minutes before the compound's security would shift from search mode to full combat operations, flooding the area with personnel and firepower that would make escape impossible. "Move," Emma commanded, leading Tyler, Sarah, and Marcus toward the perimeter fence while using available cover to mask their withdrawal from the detention building. They'd covered perhaps half the distance when Emma's worst fears materialized. Captain Robert Hayes emerged from the compound's main building flanked by 4 heavily armed men, moving with the confident stride of someone who'd orchestrated this entire situation and was prepared to eliminate any threats to his operation. "Master Sergeant Emma Collins," Hayes called out, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone that had once commanded respect and obedience from Precision Unit. Or should I say Eagle Eye? I have to admit, I'm impressed. 9 years of successful hiding, and you managed to build quite a comfortable life for yourself. Emma positioned Tyler, Sarah, and Marcus behind a maintenance vehicle while keeping her rifle trained on Hayes and his escort. The distance was approximately 150 yards, well within her effective range, but complicated by the presence of multiple targets and the need to protect weakened teammates. "Captain Hayes," Emma replied, her voice carrying across the compound with lethal calm. "Or should I say Judas? $20 million seems like a bargain price for selling out your own soldiers." Hayes laughed, the sound echoing off the compound's buildings like breaking glass. $20 million was just the initial payment, Emma. The conspiracy I've helped build is worth billions, and it's going to reshape how military contracts are awarded for the next 20 years. Precision Unit was collateral damage in a much larger operation. "The soldiers you murdered were human beings with families and futures," Emma said, using the conversation to evaluate tactical options, while her teammates recovered strength for the final escape attempt. "The soldiers I eliminated were witnesses to operations that couldn't be allowed to reach official channels," Hayes replied. "Just like you and your rescued friends are witnesses who can't be allowed to leave this compound alive." Hayes gestured to his escort, and Emma immediately recognized the tactical positioning that preceded coordinated assault. 4 rifles swinging toward her position while Hayes moved to cover, the same movement pattern he'd taught Precision Unit during training exercises that now seemed like preparation for this moment of ultimate betrayal. Emma's response was instinctive and devastating. Her first shot eliminated the leftmost gunman before he could acquire a target, the precision round striking center mass with terminal effect. Her second shot caught the rightmost attacker as he dove for cover, the bullet finding its mark despite his evasive movement. Tyler, despite his weakened condition, proved that his marksmanship skills remained sharp. His pistol barked twice in rapid succession, eliminating the third attacker, while Emma engaged the fourth with a shot that demonstrated why she'd earned the call sign Eagle Eye. Captain Hayes found himself alone and exposed, his escort eliminated in less than 4 seconds by the same soldiers he'd betrayed 9 years ago. Emma could see the fear in his eyes, the recognition that the young woman he'd once commanded had become something far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. "It's over, Hayes," Emma called out, her rifle centered on his chest. "Surrender now, and you might live long enough to face trial for treason and murder." Hayes's response was to draw his sidearm and fire wildly in Emma's direction, his shots going wide due to panic and poor tactical positioning. Emma's return shot was a masterpiece of precision marksmanship, striking Hayes's weapon hand and sending his pistol spinning away into the darkness. But even as Hayes collapsed, clutching his shattered hand and screaming in pain, Emma could hear the approaching roar of multiple vehicles racing toward the compound. The reinforcement convoy had arrived ahead of schedule, bringing dozens of additional personnel who would flood the area with overwhelming firepower within minutes. "Tyler, get Sarah and Marcus to the extraction point," Emma commanded, indicating a rally point they'd established during their escape planning. "I'll provide covering fire and follow as soon as possible." "Emma, we're not leaving you behind," Tyler protested, though he was already helping Marcus toward the perimeter fence. "That's an order, Sergeant Martinez," Emma replied, using Tyler's old military rank to invoke the chain of command authority that had once kept their unit functioning under impossible conditions. "Get our people to safety. I'll be right behind you." As Tyler led Sarah and Marcus toward the fence line, Emma established a defensive position that would allow her to delay pursuing forces while her teammates reached the extraction point. Her rifle was loaded with specialized rounds, designed for maximum tactical effect, and her position offered excellent fields of fire across the compound's main approach routes. The first wave of reinforcements arrived in a convoy of black SUVs that disgorged armed personnel with military-grade equipment and tactical coordination. Emma's precision fire immediately disrupted their deployment, eliminating key personnel and forcing the others to take defensive positions rather than pursuing her escaping teammates. But Emma understood that her situation was becoming increasingly desperate. She was one person with limited ammunition facing dozens of trained killers who had unlimited reinforcements and sophisticated equipment. The tactical mathematics were simple and unforgiving. She could delay pursuit long enough for Tyler, Sarah, and Marcus to escape, but her own chances of survival were diminishing with each passing minute. Emma's communication gear crackled with Agent Foster's voice. "Eagle Eye extraction helicopter is inbound to your position. Can you reach the landing zone?" Emma checked her tactical map, noting that the extraction point was 800 yards away across open ground that was now swarming with hostile forces. "Negative on direct route. Will attempt alternate approach through the forest." As she prepared to abandon her defensive position and make a desperate run for the extraction point, Emma caught sight of Tyler Martinez moving back toward her position instead of continuing toward safety. Despite her orders and his weakened condition, her old spotter was returning to provide covering fire for her withdrawal. "Tyler, what the hell are you doing?" Emma transmitted. "Same thing you'd do for me," Tyler replied, his voice carrying the determination that had made him such an effective partner during their years together in Precision Unit. Eagle Eye doesn't abandon her spotter, and her spotter doesn't abandon Eagle Eye. The reunion was about to become a fighting withdrawal under combat conditions, with two soldiers who'd once been the military's most effective sniper team facing overwhelming odds in a desperate attempt to escape the consequences of a conspiracy that had already claimed too many lives. Emma and Tyler moved through the forest like ghosts given deadly purpose, their old partnership resuming as if 9 years of separation had been mere days. Sarah Chen and Marcus Webb waited at the extraction point, both wounded but determined to reach freedom after years of captivity that should have killed weaker souls. Behind them, searchlights swept the compound as Captain Hayes directed his remaining forces in a desperate hunt for the escaped prisoners who could expose his entire operation. The extraction helicopter appeared over the ridgeline exactly on schedule, its rotor signature masked by the mountain winds that Agent Foster had factored into the operational planning. Emma recognized the aircraft as military surplus modified for civilian use, the kind of anonymous transportation that left no official fingerprints while providing the capability needed for hostile environment extraction. "Eagle Eye, this is Rescue Bird," the pilot's voice crackled through Emma's communication gear. "Landing zone is hot with multiple hostiles converging on your position. Recommend immediate displacement to alternate pickup point." Emma checked her tactical display, noting that Hayes's forces had anticipated their escape route and positioned blocking forces between the original extraction point and the helicopter's approach path. The alternate pickup point would require a dangerous crossing of open ground under direct observation from compound security, but remaining in their current position would allow hostile forces to surround them completely. "Tyler, can Sarah and Marcus handle a sprint under fire?" Emma asked, though she could see the answer in their determined expressions. "We've waited 9 years for this chance," Sarah replied, checking the captured weapon Emma had provided. "We're not stopping now because of a few mercenaries with more money than training." Marcus Webb, despite his injuries, managed a grim smile that reminded Emma why he'd been such an effective member of their original unit. "Emma, I've been dreaming about payback for so long that I'm actually grateful these idiots gave us the opportunity." The movement to the alternate extraction point required tactical coordination under combat pressure, with Emma providing overwatch while Tyler led Sarah and Marcus through terrain that offered minimal cover from pursuing forces. Emma's rifle spoke 3 times during the crossing, each shot eliminating threats that could have compromised their escape or endangered the extraction helicopter. But it was Tyler's shooting that proved most decisive, his pistol work demonstrating that years of captivity hadn't diminished his marksmanship skills. When hostile forces attempted to flank their movement, Tyler's precise fire forced them into defensive positions that allowed the escaping prisoners to reach the landing zone without casualties. The helicopter pilot proved his skill by landing in conditions that would have challenged military aviators, setting down on uneven ground while maintaining rotor clearance from surrounding trees. Emma provided security while her teammates boarded, her rifle tracking potential threats across multiple approach routes. As the helicopter lifted off, Emma caught sight of Captain Hayes standing at the compound's perimeter fence, his injured hand bandaged, but his expression filled with the rage of someone who'd watched a profitable conspiracy crumble around him. Their eyes met across the distance, and Emma saw recognition of his complete defeat in Hayes's face. But Hayes had one final card to play. As the helicopter gained altitude, Emma spotted the telltale flash of a shoulder-fired missile launching from the compound's main building. The surface-to-air missile streaked toward their aircraft with lethal intent, forcing the pilot into evasive maneuvers that tested the helicopter's mechanical limits. Emma's response was instinctive and devastating. Through the helicopter's open door, she acquired the missile launcher's position and fired a single shot at maximum effective range, her bullet striking the operator and causing his second missile to launch wildly off target. The precision shot at nearly 1,000 yards while firing from a moving aircraft demonstrated exactly why Emma Collins had earned the call sign Eagle Eye. The first missile's proximity detonation damaged the helicopter's tail rotor, forcing the pilot to execute an emergency landing in a mountain meadow 5 miles from the compound. But they were alive, they were free, and they carried evidence that would expose the conspiracy responsible for murdering American soldiers for corporate profit. Agent Foster's support team reached them within 30 minutes, providing medical attention for the injured and secure transportation away from the operational area. As dawn broke over the Colorado mountains, Emma found herself sitting in a government safe house watching Tyler, Sarah, and Marcus receive treatment for injuries that bore witness to years of systematic torture and abuse. The evidence Tyler gathered is more comprehensive than we initially realized, Agent Foster reported. Financial records, communication intercepts, and documented proof of conspiracy involving defense contractors, intelligence officials, and foreign buyers. This will trigger investigations that could reshape how military contracts are awarded and monitored. Emma nodded, understanding that their escape had accomplished more than just personal rescue. The intelligence Tyler had compiled during his years of investigation would expose corruption that extended far beyond Captain Hayes and his immediate conspirators, potentially preventing future betrayals of American military personnel. "What happens to Hayes?" Emma asked. "Federal marshals arrested him this morning at a private medical facility where he was receiving treatment for his injuries," Foster replied. "He's facing charges for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of numerous federal statutes. The evidence you helped recover will ensure he spends the rest of his life in federal prison." Sarah Chen looked up from the medical examination table where a physician was treating injuries that would leave permanent scars. "What about the defense contractors and foreign buyers? The people who paid Hayes to eliminate our unit?" Agent Foster's expression hardened. "Multiple federal agencies are coordinating arrests and asset seizures across 3 countries. The financial trail Tyler documented has led investigators to bank accounts, shell companies, and communication networks that will take years to fully unravel. But the core conspiracy is finished." Marcus Webb, his arm in a sling and his face showing signs of prolonged malnutrition, managed a weak smile. "So we won, 9 years later, but we finally won." Emma understood that victory came with costs that could never be fully calculated. 7 members of Precision Unit had died in the original ambush, their lives lost to corporate greed and institutional betrayal. The 3 survivors had spent nearly a decade in captivity, tortured and abused while their families mourned them as dead. And Emma herself had lost 9 years of normal life, forced into hiding by circumstances beyond her control. But they had survived, they had exposed the truth, and they had prevented future soldiers from suffering the same fate. In the brutal mathematics of military service, that counted as victory even when the price seemed impossibly high. 2 weeks later, Emma Collins returned to Pine Ridge, Colorado, where the autumn leaves were turning gold and red against the backdrop of snow-capped mountains. The townspeople welcomed her back with the casual warmth of a community that had never suspected their quiet librarian was capable of anything more dangerous than recommending inappropriate romance novels to conservative church ladies. Sandra Martinez brought her children to the bookstore on Emma's first day back, their excited chatter filling the familiar space with life and normalcy. "Emma, we missed you," little Sophia announced. Mrs. Henderson from the library tried to help people find books, but she didn't know where you keep the good adventure stories. Emma knelt to Sophia's level, genuinely moved by the girl's enthusiasm and the reminder that she'd built something meaningful in Pine Ridge beyond her carefully constructed cover identity. I missed you too, Sophia. Did you finish that book about wolves? As Sophia launched into a detailed explanation of everything she'd learned about pack hunting strategies, Emma felt the familiar peace of small-town life settling around her like a comfortable blanket. The bookstore represented safety, community, and the normal existence she'd fought to preserve during her temporary return to the world of classified operations and deadly skills. But the peace was different now, seasoned by the knowledge that some threats required specialized responses that couldn't be delegated to official authorities. Emma's weapons remained readily accessible. Her communication equipment stayed connected to networks that monitored emerging situations, and her skills remained sharp through regular practice at the shooting range she'd built beneath the bookstore. Agent Foster had offered Emma a position with a federal task force dedicated to investigating military corruption and protecting soldiers from institutional betrayal. The work would have been meaningful and important, but it would have required abandoning the life she'd built in Pine Ridge and returning to a world where human connections were luxury that professional obligations rarely allowed. Emma had declined the offer with gratitude and a counterproposal. She would remain available for consultation on specific cases that required her unique expertise, but Emma Collins, the bookstore owner, would continue serving coffee and recommending novels to tourists who had no idea that their quiet librarian was one of the most dangerous people in Colorado. 3 months after the rescue operation, Emma received a package with no return address containing a photograph that made her smile with genuine happiness. The picture showed Tyler Martinez, Sarah Chen, and Marcus Webb standing together on a beach somewhere tropical, their faces bearing the relaxed expressions of people who'd finally found peace after years of struggle. Tyler had purchased a small fishing charter business in the Caribbean, using settlement money from classified legal proceedings to build a life that kept him near the ocean, but far from any military installations. Sarah Chen had accepted a position with a private security firm that specialized in protecting corporate whistleblowers and government witnesses, work that allowed her to use her intelligence skills for causes that served justice rather than profit. Marcus Webb had disappeared completely, his new identity and location known only to people who understood that some soldiers needed to become invisible in order to survive. Emma added the photograph to her personal collection, placing it next to the picture of Precision Unit's original 8 members that served as a reminder of both loss and loyalty. 7 soldiers had died in service to corporate conspiracy, but 3 had survived to expose the truth and prevent future betrayals. In the harsh arithmetic of military justice, that represented a victory worth celebrating. On a crisp December morning, as Emma prepared to open Collins' Books and Coffee for another day of serving the Pine Ridge community, her secure telephone rang with a number she recognized. Agent Foster's voice carried the familiar urgency that indicated emerging situations requiring specialized intervention. Emma, we have a situation developing in Eastern Europe. Military contractors working for energy companies, mercenaries targeting investigation teams, and evidence suggesting American Special Operations personnel are being set up for elimination. We need someone with your skills to assess the threat and potentially extract compromised personnel. Emma looked out at Pine Ridge's Main Street, where Pete Garrison was walking toward the hardware store for his morning coffee, and Sandra Martinez was preparing to open the elementary school for another day of teaching children about literature and mathematics. The peace was real, the community was genuine, and the life she'd built was worth protecting. I'll need operational parameters, intelligence assessments, and guaranteed extraction support, Emma replied, understanding that eagle eye would always exist beneath the surface of Emma Collins's carefully constructed normalcy. Already prepared and waiting for your review, Foster said. This could be the beginning of another conspiracy similar to what destroyed Precision Unit, but this time, we have advance warning and the expertise to stop it before soldiers die. Emma poured herself a cup of coffee and settled into the chair by the window where Pete Garrison usually worked his crossword puzzles. Outside, Pine Ridge was waking up to another ordinary day in a small mountain town where everyone knew everyone's business except hers. Send me the files, Emma said quietly. I'll review the situation and provide recommendations within 24 hours. As she ended the call, Emma understood that her carefully constructed ordinary life would always be balanced against the reality that some skills were too important to abandon completely. She was Emma Collins, the friendly bookstore owner who served excellent coffee and recommended novels that could transport readers to different worlds. But when circumstances required intervention that official authorities couldn't provide, she would always be eagle-eye, the sniper who could split a coin at 1,000 yards and bring American soldiers home from places that didn't officially exist. Some legends never truly retire. They just wait in the shadows for the moment when their skills become necessary once again. The brass bell above the bookstore's door chimed as Pete Garrison entered for his daily crossword puzzle and black coffee, beginning another ordinary day in Pine Ridge, Colorado, where the quiet librarian kept secrets that could change the world if the world ever needed changing. And in the growing light of a mountain sunrise, Emma Collins smiled and reached for the coffee pot, ready to serve her community while remaining prepared for whatever mission might call Eagle Eye back into the shadows, where heroes work without recognition, and legends are born from necessity rather than choice. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.